For years, Kody Brown's last working relationship with his adult children ran through a son-in-law. Not a daughter, not a son, through Tony Padron. In April 2026, his own daughter Mykelti said out loud that the bridge was Tony, and then she closed the bridge. That one sentence contains everything you need to understand about what happened to this family, and why the version Kody still tells himself cannot possibly be true. We're going to walk through all of it today, slowly, because it deserves that. It deserves the wait. If this kind of deep dive analysis is why you're here, hit like and subscribe right now. Sister Wives Crew is the place where we don't just watch what happens, we figure out why it happened and what it actually means. Hit the bell so you never miss a breakdown. Now let's get into this. Let's start with the basic timeline, because context matters. Mykelti Brown Padron has, for the better part of the last several years, been the one adult child of Kody's who still had something resembling a functional relationship with her father. While Padron was going on podcasts, while Gwendolyn was live streaming, while Aspen maintained a dignified distance, and Isabel and Aurora carried wounds that hadn't finished healing, Mykelti was still in the picture. Still showing up. Still, in some meaningful way, connected. She was the counter-evidence that kept the estrangement narrative from being total. She was the asterisk next to every headline that said Kody had lost his kids. Then April 2026 happened, and Mykelti sat down and explained, in her own words, how that relationship actually worked. And in explaining it, she ended it not dramatically, not with anger, but with a clarity that is somehow more devastating than anger would have been. She said it plainly. Her dad and she don't talk right now. She described the period when she was, in her words, the favorite child. And then she gave her own theory of why. Kody liked Tony. Tony was good with Kody. And Mykelti, and this is her word, not mine, was willing. She was willing to be there, willing to facilitate, willing to hold the door open. And when she stopped being willing, the relationship didn't adjust. It ended. Because there was nothing structural left to hold it up. Sit with that for a second. Because there's a man who has built his entire public identity around being a patriarch, around fatherhood as a calling, around family as the thing that defines him. And the last functional relationship he had with any of his adult children was held together by the son-in-law that daughter married. Not by the decades of shared history. Not by the parent-child bond, by Tony Padron being easy to be around, and Mykelti being willing to provide the access. Now, I want to be precise here, because precision matters when we're talking about real people's real family pain. Mykelti didn't say the relationship was fake. She didn't say Kody didn't love her. She didn't say Tony was a prop. What she described sounds more like a gradient of a relationship that was real, but functionally dependent on conditions that she was the one maintaining. And at some point, she looked at the math and decided the equation wasn't working in her favor. That's not a dramatic betrayal. That's not a screaming fight. That's something quieter and harder. That's a daughter realizing that the relationship requires her to do something that costs her, and that the cost is only going up, and deciding calmly, thoughtfully, that she's done paying it. That's the kind of ending most family ruptures actually have. Not a door slam, a door that quietly stops being opened. Here's the thing that I keep coming back to, though. The relationship worked. For years, it actually worked. Tony and Kody got along. Mykelti stayed connected. The family had a node, a point of contact, a line that hadn't gone dark. So on one level, you could look at that and say, well, at least something was functioning. At least there was one thread. And that's true. There was one thread. But now ask the harder question. If the thread ran through Tony, what was the thread actually made of? Was it a father-daughter relationship that Tony enhanced? Or was it a father-son-in-law relationship that Mykelti happened to be adjacent to? Mykelti seems to have answered that question for herself. The fact that she named the structure in April 2026, the fact that she said out loud that Tony was the reason, Tony was the connector, Tony was the thing Kody was actually showing up for, that's not a neutral observation. That's the conclusion. She concluded something about what her relationship with her father was and wasn't, and she acted on that conclusion. I think that's actually the most important moment in this whole story, and it's easy to miss. It's not the estrangement that's significant. Estrangement has been the dominant theme of this family for years. What's significant is the naming. Mykelti didn't just stop talking to her dad, she explained why, with a level of structural clarity that most people never achieve when they're in the middle of family pain. She identified the load-bearing wall, and she said, "This wall is not mine to hold up." That's an insight. That's someone who has done serious thinking about what happened and why. Now, I'm going to go somewhere more speculative here, and I'll flag it clearly as my read, not documented fact. But I think there's a reason Kody found Tony easier than he found Mykelti. Tony Padron came into this family as an adult. He didn't grow up in that house. He didn't sit through the moves, the family meetings, the decisions that shaped and sometimes broke the children who lived through them. He didn't carry the memory of things that happened when he was 8 or 12 or 15. He arrived as a finished person, and his relationship with Kody started from zero. No history, no grievances. No moments filed away for decades, just two men who happened to both love Mykelti and who found, somewhat against the odds, that they actually got along. That's a clean slate relationship, and clean slate relationships are easy. They're easy because there's nothing to work through. There's no debt owed, no wound inflicted, no version of yourself you have to account for. You just show up as who you are now, and that's the entire record. Kody's kids don't have that luxury. They were there. They watched. They lived in a structure that asked enormous things of them and gave them complicated things in return. And when they became adults with their own voices, those voices carried all of that. Every conversation with Kody now happens in a room full of history that Kody may not want to be in. Tony walked into a different room. A smaller room. A room without furniture for 20 years. And Kody, who has always struggled with accountability for the past, was more comfortable there. If that read is right, and I think it at least partially is, then what Mykelti was functionally doing was providing Kody with access to that clean slate room. She was at the door. Tony was in the room. And when Mykelti got tired of being at the door, Kody lost access to both. He didn't just lose his daughter. He lost the one context in which he could be a version of himself he probably liked better. Now let's talk about what audiences saw on camera, because the cameras were there for a lot of this. Kody's warmth toward Tony has always read as genuine. If you go back and watch the scenes, the early ones where Tony was being introduced to the family, the later ones where he and Kody were actually interacting, there's an ease there that is notably absent from Kody's interactions with his own kids. With the kids, there's often tension below the surface, a guardedness, a sense of things unsaid. With Tony, Kody seemed to just relax. And audiences picked up on it, even without fully articulating what they were seeing. The comment sections noticed. The fan communities noticed. The relationship with the son-in-law was warmer than the relationship with the daughters. Here's where I want to push back on the instinct to call that warmth fake. I don't think the warmth was fake. I think the warmth was real. I think Kody genuinely liked Tony. And I think that's actually the more damning version of the story. Not that he was performing, but that the genuine version of him was more available to someone who hadn't grown up watching him fail. The inauthenticity wasn't in the warmth toward Tony. The inauthenticity was in the comfortable public implication that this warmth meant Kody was okay as a father. That if a son-in-law liked him this much, things couldn't be that bad. That's the sleight of hand. You can be genuinely warm to one person and genuinely harmful to another. Those aren't contradictions. They're just the complicated and sometimes ugly truth about how people operate. Mykelti noticed. However long it took her, however many times she probably recalibrated and gave it another chance, she eventually noticed the gap between what was available to Tony and what was available to her. And at some point, she stopped trying to explain the gap away. Let me tell you what I think the thematic core of this actually is, because I think it's bigger than Kody and Mykelti and Tony. This is a story about what happens when a patriarch can't actually function as a patriarch. A patriarch, the role Kody has claimed loudly and repeatedly for his entire adult life, is supposed to be the connective tissue of the family, the one who holds things together, the center that everything orbits and returns to. In theory, the patriarch is the one doing the bridging, the one reaching out, the one whose presence creates family cohesion rather than requiring it to be created for him. In the Brown family, that role inverted. Kody wasn't the connector. He was connected. He needed Tony to be the bridge that brought Mykelti to him, because Kody couldn't or wouldn't build that bridge himself. The daughter had to arrange the access. The son-in-law had to be the lubricant. The patriarch needed to be served by the family structure rather than serving it. And that inversion, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's present in the estrangements with the other kids too. Kody has consistently waited for people to come to him, to do the work of bridging, to lower their expectations and their needs to a level he could meet. The few connections that survived were the ones where someone else was willing to do the structural labor of maintaining them. Mykelti was doing that labor for years. She was holding up her end and, quietly, his end too. And the April 2026 disclosure tells us that she finally did an accounting and decided that this was not a sustainable arrangement. Here's another dimension to this that I don't want to skip over. There's a public narrative cost to what Mykelti said. She was the counter-evidence. While the fandom was watching one child after another describe a father who had failed them, Mykelti's continued presence in Kody's life was the rebuttal. It allowed a certain kind of Kody defender, and they exist. They comment, they show up to say, well, it can't be that bad, because Mykelti's still there. Mykelti is reasonable. Mykelti wouldn't stay if the situation was as bad as the others describe it. Mykelti being done removes that rebuttal from the table, not just for the audience, for Kody. And for any version of Kody's future narrative in which he tries to rehabilitate his image as a father. The counter-evidence has now joined the evidence. The asterisk is gone. The asterisk, named Tony, explained the mechanism and said goodbye. There's something quietly devastating about that trajectory. Mykelti wasn't a defender who turned into an enemy. She was a daughter who genuinely tried, who genuinely found a way to stay connected longer than almost any of her siblings, and who finally arrived at a conclusion she couldn't argue herself out of anymore. That's not betrayal. That's the end of a longer process. And the fact that she was so clear about the structure Tony was the reason, Tony was the connector, and I was willing, and now I'm not suggesting she's not leaving in confusion or anger. She's leaving with clarity, and clear departures tend to stick. Now let's map where this leaves Kody in terms of his adult children as of right now, because I want to be honest about the landscape. Gwendolyn has been publicly vocal about her feelings. Isabel had a documented rupture and has maintained her distance. Aspen has stayed quiet in a way that reads as chosen distance rather than active engagement. Aurora and Brianna have largely stayed out of the public narrative. Peyton has been vocal in his own way. And now Mykelti, the one who stayed longest, the one who had a structural reason to stay, the one who provided the last functioning counter-narrative, has said that she and Kody don't talk right now. Tony and Mykelti are still a family. They have their children, they have their life. Kody is not inside that family. He is outside it, and the direction of that exclusion is worth naming clearly. Kody didn't push Mykelti out. Mykelti left. She left because she did the math and determined that the cost of staying was hers to bear, and not Kody's. She left because naming the structure made staying inside it feel impossible. She left and she explained why, which is both more painful and more final than leaving without explanation. The isolation that Kody has been moving toward for years is now, as of April 2026, essentially complete on the adult children front. The last bridge closed. The man who built his identity around fatherhood is, by his own daughter's account, not in contact with her. The patriarch is alone on the outside of the family he created. I want to close with something Mykelti said, because it's the line that will stay with me longest from this whole disclosure. She said simply that she was willing. She was willing to be the one holding the structure up. She was willing to facilitate access to Tony. She was willing to be present in a relationship that was, at its core, more about what Kody needed than about what was reciprocal and sustaining for her. Willing. That's a word that implies choice, and implied in that choice is its opposite. She was willing until she wasn't, and when she stopped being willing, there was nothing left beneath the willingness. Nothing structural. Nothing Kody had built or maintained or contributed his share to. Just the absence of her effort. And in that absence, a complete silence. She didn't tear the relationship down, she just stopped holding it up. That's the distinction I keep coming back to, because it matters. Tearing something down is an act of destruction. You can blame someone for tearing something down. You can tell a story about vandalism and anger and loss. But stopping holding something up? That's exhaustion. That's recognition. That's someone saying, I've been carrying this, and I'm going to put it down now. You can't blame someone for putting on weight. You can only wonder why no one else was helping to carry it. Most family relationships that end this way. Not on fire, not in a dramatic confrontation that makes for good television. They end when the person who was doing the work of maintaining them decides to stop, and discovers that the work was the entire foundation. They end in the quiet that follows someone's willingness running out. Mykelti's willingness ran out, and with it, Kody Brown's last functioning adult-child relationship closed. That's the story. That's what April 2026 told us. Not just about Kody and Mykelti, about what this family has been under the surface the whole time we've been watching. If you've made it this far, drop a pit in the comments if you think any of Kody's other kids still have a Tony-shaped bridge open to him. Someone in their life who makes the relationship with Kody just workable enough to maintain. Drop a Kate if you think those bridges are already gone. I want to see what you think because this community reads this show better than any recap I've ever found. And subscribe if you're not already here, because in the next video, I'm doing something I've been building toward for a while. I'm mapping every single in-law in the Brown family. Every husband, every wife, every partner, and where they actually stand with Kody right now. Who's a bridge? Who's a wall? Who's just quietly gone? That video is going to reframe how you see the whole extended family dynamic, and you're not going to want to miss it. Sister Wives crew, we don't just watch, we understand. See you in the next one!